Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with dailystraits.com. I am your host, June Ramli, and today we are joined by entrepreneur Bruce Poon Tip, founder of G Adventures, a pioneer of community tourism, and the executive producer of the documentary The Last Tourist. The Last Tourist is an award-winning documentary that addresses the real impact of mass tourism on the environment, wildlife, and vulnerable communities in 16 different countries. With the post-pandemic travel resuming at a fast pace, my chat with Bruce today will involve around how we can become more responsible travelers. So Bruce, it's super great to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, okay, let's dive right into the questions. First, could you take me through the motions on how The Last Tourist, your first documentary, got its start?
Oh, that's a very long process. It was 6 years ago that we had our first meeting about the possibility of, the first meeting was about doing our own short documentary with iPhones. The actual meeting was about the advancement in technology and iPhones being digital and HD now. And could we possibly put together our own documentary, kind of telling our own story, and make it kind of do it like with our own people internally, like our own content team, and make a documentary short. And that kind of escalated to, there's a lot of, we should hire a writer, an external writer that can put the content together and make the story, and then they came to me and said, we should get a director. There's a lot here. It's a much bigger story, and it's bigger than G Adventures, actually. There's a big tourism kind of angle here. And once we searched for a director, we found a director who had, was experienced and was passionate about this particular project, which took some time. And then they came to me and said, this is a big movie. Like, we could do a really full-length documentary here. It was just a matter of budget. It went from tens of thousands of dollars and using our resources to millions to produce a full-length documentary. And and it was just kind of a passion project in the end for everyone. Everyone was, really putting, all of their efforts into it. And it came together really quickly.
Okay, so was it challenging to produce the documentary? So you said 6 years ago, right? So what happened with the pandemic? Because it's just released in Australia, 1st of March.
Yeah.
So was it released last year?
It was released last year in North America. It was much more complex to get. Australia is more difficult for. It's the rating system, I think. It's really out of our hands once we sell the documentary to a distribution company. So we have distributors who dealt with the distribution in Australia and New Zealand, and for some reason it took longer to get the ratings. But it was released in the United States and Canada last year. It was released in Australia, I guess, about like last week. That it's on the streaming channels, and it's next month. It's going to be released in the UK and the rest of Europe. So it's been a long process, but you have to understand this film came out of nowhere, right? Like a private company funded it, and it had to go through the film festival circuit to win awards and get attention because it didn't go through the regular. The regular ways in which documentaries get seen or sold.
Okay, can I just take you back there? So what do you mean by ratings? Like for Australia, you need the ratings. What does that mean?
I think in order for a film to be approved in a country, it has to be watched and rated, like, parental guidance or, whatever rating. And it's got to be approved. And Australia has a much more complex system. That's my understanding. That's why sometimes you guys don't get movies until really late, because the rating and usually that's a process with the film with the producers of films, because like if it's a movie that you're trying to get into a certain rating, you can negotiate back and forth of cutting some parts, adding some parts, understanding what Australians the I don't know, censors or the boards that just decide these things. What they want in order to get the ratings you want. Documentaries are a little different. Ours, was pretty, it's about tourism, and tourism is a big industry in Australia. So I think that it took time for them to kind of approve it because it's critical of, a lot of mainstream tourism. And so there's just a process that every country has to have to Every country has things, I guess, they want their nation to see, and they're protective of things that come in that they, you might call that censorship, but every country kind of has a level of censorship or standards that have to be followed. And I think Australia is kind of known, I think, for being a little bit more difficult, I think.
Okay, so did you do any work during lockdown? Because you said 6 years, right? So the process did go through the lockdown, 2020
Yeah.
to 20.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, well, the film was all filmed by the time, like, all the filming was done before the pandemic, and we were in editing at that stage. But then the pandemic hit, and we ended up reopening the film and adding more to it because it was so relevant to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
We were kind of grateful that we didn't release the film sooner, because if we'd have released the film and then the pandemic hit, and how it's changed travel so much, it would have been irrelevant very quickly. So we were quite happy that we got a chance to, add a COVID messaging in the film, because it really is a very positive message of hope about tourism, and COVID kind of just highlighted a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the movie. But when it came out so closely after COVID, many people thought, like, how did Bruce Poon Tip do that? How did he predict and make a documentary so fast? People don't know I was working on it actually for 6 months. It was just kind of a coincidence. But don't tell anyone that. That's our secret.
So how much of a change that you had to, endure during COVID? Was it a big change or just
for me?
Yeah, no, for the documentary.
Oh, well, yeah, it's quite a bit. I mean, it was more reinforcing all the messages. We had to reopen the film completely to add a COVID. Like, when you add sections to a movie, like, I learned all this along the way. I'm not an executive producer or film guy. I got, kind of got thrown into this whole project in many ways, and I learned along the way. And we had to reopen the film and add parts to it. And when you have, it's quite a complex process, because when you have a soundtrack and you colorize films, and you edit and you have film. You have animation, you have all kinds of things that make your film come together. And COVID wasn't taken into consideration when we were filming the content and the script of what we were trying to put together. And so to reopen it and add it is more complex than just filming a few little scenes. Now, so that's way above my pay grade, because that's the writers and the directors that kind of did all that. I as an executive producer, I funded the film. I watched the kind of final I gave my opinions after a lot of that stuff was done. They had full creative control. Tyson, the director, had full creative control to take the film in any direction he chose. And as you know, it went from 6 years ago being a film about our company to, if you've seen it, like, it doesn't mention G Adventures even once, because the story is much bigger than that. And that was kind of that's how we we have a philosophy and at G Adventures: if you can't travel with us, travel like us. And this was kind of putting our money where our mouth is, that we wanted to produce this film, even though it wasn't a vanity kind of corporate commercial for G Adventures. It was still a very positive message of how we can impact positively by traveling.
Okay, great. So yes, I want to talk about the budget. I mean, you can just tell me whatever you feel like telling me. So it was kind of like fully funded by yourself, or so this is for wannabe filmmakers out there who aspire to be like you one day.
Yeah.
How does one, like, you're a full-fledged businessman and you own a travel agency, but you did a movie on the side, right? So, like, tell us a ballpark figure of the costing. Like, what are we looking here, like, for something for the last tourist?
Well, I think I can't give actual numbers, because there was so many people who worked on this film and contributed their time. In the end, like, I'll be honest with what we thought the budget could be. We thought originally we could do this budget for like $500,000.
Okay.
Right? And so that was kind of with the thought that we could. And then once we got all the film crews out on the road, and we realized we had to cover the whole world, and we have to go to 16 countries instead of 3 or 4 countries, the budget just kept blowing up as the story started growing and the content, and we built trust in each other between the director. I was learning along the way. It was really an organic process for us. But you know, if you actually, but there was so many people, specifically, you know, our editors and directors and producers who, you know, made very little and gave tons and tons of time. Like, it was years of time, and it was a labor of love for many people. And so if I said, like, you know, millions of dollars in hours, it wasn't millions of dollars it cost us, because there was, you know, we increased our budget as we could. And there was a line in which we said, you know, there's no return on investment for this for us, you know. But yeah, like a movie like this would take, you know, would take millions to do. But with the amount of hours that we had and the people that contributed and that were so passionate about this, you know, film, you know, everyone kind of had a part in putting it together. I mean, we still paid a lot of money, and you know, we had, you know, even the place where we edited the film, and you know, they gave us, you know, just many hours of off hours in the studio for free, and we were negotiating just to get it done, because it grew into be such a big project compared to what it started off to be. And then COVID hit. And that expanded the whole production cycle, when we had to reopen the film and restart shooting and restart editing again. So, and by then there was a lot of people bought into the whole concept of the movie, the idea of the movie. So everyone is passionate. I'm very grateful and thankful for a lot of people that contributed, you know, a lot of hard work and heart and soul, and their time to get this film done.
So how did you do the shooting during pandemic? Like, was it a
well, most of the shooting was done before the actually all the shooting was done before the pandemic.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, we had all the shooting done before the pandemic. Now we added some scenes with the pandemic, and we were able to you know, use some of the film that we had. We did do a little bit of filming, but that kind of filming was more airport filming, like because we were talking about the world shutting down, and we were able to, you know, get some footage to use for that. Like we have, there's some really cool shots of, you know, the Times Square empty, like not a single car, not a single person in it. And we were able to get, you know, film some cool scenes like that. Yeah, but we had to be creative for sure.
Okay, cool. So I also noticed, right? Forgive me, because I actually saw the documentary before interviewing you. It has you use kind of still images, and then at the end I saw the credits. You gave credit to Getty Image, and all these things. So you know those animals, where the animals will be in the circus, and some tourists will see elephants getting abused. Were that your because that part looked a bit it looked different from the documentary. The stills were the recording was a bit I could say older. Is it older?
Yeah.
Or
I don't think it was much. Yeah, I think it was a little bit older, but it wasn't much older. I mean, a lot of that footage we had to buy some footage. We had to acquire some footage, and we also got, you know, partnerships and licensing agreements with some people that had those that photo. Some of the photos, and like we work with different animal welfare groups. We look with, you know, Child Safe. And they supplied us some footage that they had, particularly the tragic kind of elephant shots. Those are undercover camera, so it looks a bit jittery, kind of. But we didn't do that. No, we didn't take that footage specifically. But we worked with a lot of different organizations that helped us come together to tell the volunteer part of the story, as well as the animal welfare side of the story.
okay, as a businessman who has a travel business, right? You're very successful, and your business is really good, and you've got a big Wikipedia mention about you on Google. So I just wondered, right? Why did you want to produce this, and what do you aim to get in the long run, like, you know, with The Last Tourist?
Well, I mean, the main motivation, I also wrote a book in 2012 called Loop Tale, and, you know, the same motivation for that book is the same motivation for this documentary, to get a message about the potential of tourism. G Adventures I've been running G Adventures for 33 years now. We're 33 years old, and we're a company that has for all these years, you know, when it wasn't cool to talk about sustainable tourism, responsible tourism, and how tourism can be a form, create poverty alleviation, and also create wealth distribution if done right. If local communities are part of the dialogue in creating tourism and executing and developing tourism, as well as the word I'm looking for is as putting tourism together, because right now they're kept out of the story, and and local people benefiting. Tourism can be a transformational industry. So I for many years was aggressive on the speaker circuit. I still do probably about 20 or 30 speaking engagements a year. And I travel all over the world. I mean, I was just in Singapore last week speaking at another conference, and I'll be going to Qatar in a couple of weeks. And I can't maintain that schedule because I have a company to run. But we still hold that message about tourism embracing its ability to be a transformational industry. And, I've been saying that for 33 years as part of, and, G Adventure is an example of that. But, as a greater industry, we can come together and be something, incredible, that can change the world. I believe tourism can change the world. And so this movie is that message, because I can't get out there and do the level of speaking that I used to do. I used to do 40, 50 speaking engagements a year. And I just can't keep at that pace. So the documentary is a great way for us to get our message out. It's an amazing way for people to see visually, as opposed to me standing in front of audiences speaking, visually see the message. And I think it's been an amazing medium to emotionally connect with people about what tourism is. And I said the pandemic has really highlighted that tourism needs to change, and people are traveling differently on the other side of the pandemic. So this movie is just a tool for that and a message, and it is a message of hope. But in order to achieve that hope, there are some confronting things about the documentary to see. But that's the reason we do it. I did it. There's certainly, going into this and in the middle of this, and even at the end of this, when they were asking to reopen it to add the COVID, it's all budget money, costs more, and it was always about. We were never promised. There was never a promise of a return on investment in this film. It strictly is a labor of love to get the message out that the travel can be transformational for not just the traveler, for local people too.
Okay, that's very good. So there was one message in the movie that you were trying to put across about the photo. Like, people go to great lengths to take photos with a monkey, with a koala, and not knowing that how the animals are actually suffering about that. Yeah. So that's a good message, and I am guilty of that at times as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's a few messages in there about animal welfare in general. Yeah, there's the Instagram culture like that exists right now, where the next generation that we're starting to prepare for in the travel industry, and saying that 29% of millennials would never travel to a destination if they couldn't post it on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a whole nother generation, a whole nother motivation to travel, and we're preparing for that. And those are the people that are want to take pictures with animals that are drugged, and a tiger in Cancun, or want to take but then there's a whole other side of entertainment, elephant riding as a form of entertainment. But then there's also an increasing demand for dolphin encounters. There's all kinds of animal welfare issues that are part of the tourism value chain that when you really look at it, and when people who really kind of think about it, the people that are actually creating this industry are actually people that love animals. They actually love animals, but they don't think for a minute how they treated that dolphin, or how many dolphins died in order to find one that's docile enough to sit so you can pet it, or have a bear that can ride a bike, or an elephant that can kick a soccer ball, which it's cruel. And I hate to say it to people, and we say it because most of the people that go to those shows is because they love animals. But if you can pet an animal, or you can make it kick a soccer ball or walk on its hands, it's probably been tortured and that's, I hope we're not telling anyone anything new by that message in the movie, but we show you, and then you can make your decision. And that's the way in which we can transform travel again.
Yeah, awesome. So finally, in your own words, how would you describe an ideal tourist? And why should every traveler aim to be one?
For me, every traveler should understand their power when they decide to, and their privilege when they decide to go on holiday. You know, there are very, as a person who can decide to go on holiday, when you think of the population on the planet, there's very few people on the planet that can just one day say, I want to go on holiday. That's a huge privilege. That's a huge privilege that we have, to have disposable income, the time, and the desire and the education to actually want to travel. Like there's so many factors that go into, and people that can actually travel is such a small percentage of people on the planet that can make that choice. So with that comes great responsibility, I think. And in answer to your next question, what I would want is people to understand that power that you have when you make that decision, and that travel is a privilege. It's not a right. You have no right to anything when you decide you want to go to another country. For some reason, we live our lives at home in a certain way. We're all living more responsibly at home. We're recycling. We're putting low-watt light bulbs and low-flush toilets. We're doing all kinds of things, 100-mile diets, or eating organically. We're doing all these things, but we suspend all those beliefs when we go to another country. And we do destructive holidays like cruises or compound resorts that consume mass amounts of natural resources when people on the other side of those walls don't have access to clean drinking water or medical care. And we just suspend our beliefs for our holidays because we're in another country. And so what I would want is that there's a tipping point where people just match their value for their holiday time, and that they understand that travel, your ability to travel is a privilege that you have because of your birthright. And it's not a right. You don't have a right to anything. It's not a one-way experience where you can pay for thread counts on sheets or entertainment or Broadway shows or whatever it is to entertain you, or children doing dances for you in schools. That's not your right. Travel is a privilege, and if you just change your mindset just to that you have a privilege to travel and it's not a right, that's all I'd ever want. And once people just turn that switch, there will be that tipping point where people will match their values with their holiday time. And that's what I would want. That's a very good question, by the way. A great ending question. Very good one. Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you, Bruce, for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and follow us in all our social media networks. Thank you.